Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle David et aujourd'hui je vais vous apporter un commentaire en français. Now I'm just kidding you guys, it's going to be English today, although in the future I may decide to one day do a nice French commentary for you. No, I'm just kidding guys, maybe one day, but it's going to be a long time from now. Anyway, today I have a Terran vs. Protoss for you, and maybe some of my more, astute viewers will notice that this is currently being played on the map Shakuras Plateau. And I had said earlier in, a few episodes ago that I was actually going to veto this map because I was so sick of playing Terran vs. Terran on it. Well, guess what, guys? It's back in the batting order. It's back on my roster of maps because I found a new most hated map for pretty much every matchup. And that is the new map Arid Plateau. I used to like it until I realized that, Zergs could just run Zerglings in to your natural from two different directions. Very similar to Zelnaga Caverns, except even more difficult to defend. And so that was, not exactly something I was really willing to deal with a mech style. I mean, at first I could do mech on it because the Zerg players hadn't really caught on to that all that much. But then they did, and that was the end of that. So that's now on my veto list. Shakuras is back. And you know what? I'm really glad, because for this map, Terran vs. Protoss, I kind of like it, especially with the strategy I'm going to be using today. That's right, folks. I am going back to mech Terran vs. Protoss, at least for a little while, just to test out this very brand new build that I saw on Day 9's mech Terran vs. Protoss 4-segment daily, so that's pretty awesome. That's daily 396. I'm so glad that he finally made one of these. I saw the original one that was about a year ago that he did on Jinro's mech, and this new mech style though seems way better than what Jinro did back then, and obviously it's way better than what I used to do as well, as far as I'm concerned. It seemed to be a lot more successful, and basically what it is, in case you guys have not watched that particular Day 9 daily, it's a mech style that starts off with Cloak Banshees, and Cloak Banshees, or Cloakshees as some people like to affectionately abbreviate them, are a great harassment unit. And the one thing that differentiates Banshees from other harassment units, in my opinion, is that they actually make an excellent army addition as well, so they don't become useless when the harassment stops. An example of another unit like this is the Mutalisk, but to a much lesser degree. Hellions, on the other hand, they have their great harassment potential when they're obviously, in a mineral line, killing a bunch of probes, but then when you add them to your army, in many cases, they're just not as good at dealing damage. They really require certain conditions to be met. Banshees, on the other hand, they're always great to have in your army, assuming that, your opponent isn't going for 100% Phoenixes. And yeah, that's kind of where I stand on the issue. So this build order, I'm not going to post it yet. I'm going to really try and refine this a little more until I get it to a point where it's not going to look like gold level play. Not that there's anything wrong with gold level, but I would like to, sort of get this build just a tiny bit more polished before I have you guys trying it out on your own. So I've already sent my scout out. I've seen that he has 1 gas. And I've also seen that he did not take an expansion. So right now what I think he's going to be doing is in fact a 1-gate or 2-gate expansion build. But I have this funny feeling that it's not that. I don't know. Something just tells me, game sense, whatever, just didn't really feel like that, because I knew that he got that probe in and scouted what I was doing. So for him to just see that, I had that fast gas, I also had the bunker right there. It just did not make sense for him to throw down that 1-gate or 2-gate expansion. I just really wasn't sort of, on that bandwagon, so to speak. You'll also note, got my cloak coming up right now, got that reactor barracks, the crux, or, wow, crux is not the right word, but maybe the sort of linchpin of this build is that reactor barracks in the opening, because it does allow you to get those marines for defense. As you can see, you're sitting ducks to any sort of 1 base all in. You really need those extra marines. And you'll notice I didn't actually produce those marines after I got 3 marines initially, And that was just to save up for my command center, which is now going down. And this is not an all-in sort of Cloak Banshee play in this matchup. This is, in fact, one that's meant to transition nicely into your mech army. And you'll see exactly how this is done later on in the build. So I'll be now getting that tech lab on the factory. Probably, yeah, I'd say the tech lab there might have been a little bit premature. Not going to really be using the factory for a little bit anyway, so it doesn't make sense to get that at this point. And like I said, this build is very, very crass at the moment, so it's going to take quite a few games of this to really sort of get this thing going. Now also keep in mind, this is the first time I've actually tried the build. I played a few games before this after I watched the daily, but it faced a bunch of Zergs, and I know you guys want to see some Terran vs. Protoss, and I promised it, so I wanted to just get this out as soon as possible. Didn't know how soon I would face another Protoss, so I could try this build even more. So I decided, you know what, I'll just go with this game. And really hope you guys like it. It was a pretty good game, I'd say. So I have my first Banshee going down the top side. And unfortunately, we aren't spawned in close air positions, which makes this harassment even more better. So what you're going to want to do, as you can see, I queue up a bunch of probes so that that Banshee will attack automatically. And I send my second Banshee down to the bottom side so I can harass his natural, which I assume to be there. I assume he's not actually going for an all-in. And I noticed that he has no observer, and I even saw that observer in my base, so a greedy Protoss not building 2 observers is going to lose a fair amount of probes. This is Banshee harassment, as you can see. So I've got 9 probes so far, I believe. It's kind of hard to tell on my screen. Yep, that was indeed 9. Now 10, 11... Do I get 12? I don't know. Looks like I might get that last probe. You do want to stutter step it a bit, but it looks like I do decide to just get the heck out of there. And I'll send my next Banshee, and he should have been a little bit closer. Now also note my macro has slipped during this time, but for 11 probes I feel like that is a good trade. Although ideally you would want to, of course, be able to do both macro and micro at the same time to become an excellent player. Now sadly he didn't run half his probes down here. So this Banshee is going to be left S-O-O-L. While the other one had a much more plentiful bounty. So another little point I want to draw attention to when doing this mech play is that I'm going to be going for Thors before tanks. This is something Avillo himself has sort of... Wow, why can't I don't know what's gone on, guys, but my English vocabulary is just not up to its usual grandeur today. What I'm trying to say is he endorses that. Thank you very much, Brain, for finally working. He does endorse Thors before tanks now because it allows you to hold off almost any rush and be perfectly safe. The tanks, on the other hand, leave you vulnerable to quite a number of things. Colossus timings being one of them, believe it or not. Now, I've also got armor on the way first. Armor before my my attack for my vehicles. And this, as Day 9 put it very eloquently, is great for the sole purpose of making zealots do less damage to your army. I think that's an absolutely stellar idea as more Banshee harassment goes on here. Getting that +1 armor makes your Thors have 2 armor. That takes essentially 4 damage away from the zealots when they attack you, assuming that he does not go for attack first. If he does, then it's still, you know, a very decent amount of damage prevented, and I feel like that's so important when you're going for mech, because you really want to have those tanks safe and dealing their maximum damage. If you get the attack upgrade for your tanks, I'd agree with that in certain situations where he's going for like mass blink stalkers or something like that. Tanks will just melt blink stalkers with that weapons upgrade. But in other cases, I think that, you know, getting that armor first really is a nice little touch to this build. And you know what? Obviously, as with everything in this game, I'm open to trying new things and just determining what is best with the limited time I have at university. But, you know, I really do think that that's probably the way to go. Now, you'll also notice that I'm getting more factories now. Those could have been earlier. As you can see, my minerals and gas are stacking. I was also late on the queuing up of SCVs on my second base refineries. That's my third and fourth refineries, and as a result, I was kind of gas blocked for a while there. Not the greatest situation. Definitely not what you want with mech, especially. But You know, with all this harassment I'm doing, it's not a big deal. I feel so far ahead right now. That first Banshee has 14 kills, I believe, and this one is getting even more. So I'll send him in there. Two-pronged harassment, obviously one of the best things you can do. Losing the Banshee, however, is not one of the best things you can do. So I think I got probably around 18 probes or so in total with this harassment, and that's definitely worth, you know, a little bit of whatever you want to call it, macro slippage, I guess you could say. Definitely a good trade. So I'm continuing to make Banshees here, also getting Thors and Hellions. I'm delaying the Blue Flame upgrade, I believe. As Day 9 said, it's really not necessary till you finally move out. Another little thing I'm going to be doing here is delaying tanks until I take my third base. With Thors, you are safe on 2 bases without tanks. Thors in a concave at the top of the ramp are going to deal with anything, especially force fields. That's just useless against a bunch of Thors. But when you take that third in a lot more open ground, Thors simply, you know, they just don't come up to snuff when it comes to dealing with a large Protoss army. You need some splash damage in there. And with tanks, you can absolutely deal enough splash to deal with a max Protoss army. Now, unfortunately, some very sloppy play is going on right here. I have no idea why this is happening, but you'll notice I have almost 200 energy on both my orbitals. That is actually embarrassing. I'm starting to regret putting this game up, guys. I'm really sorry about that. When you're doing a foreign build like this, it honestly feels foreign. And as a result, things like this do tend to happen. For instance, if I were on my game in any sort of regard right now, I would have muled up that third base immediately with all that energy, but for whatever crazy reason, I have chosen not to do that. Ah, sadness. You will need to save some scans in order to kill the observers when you do come to that engagement, so your Banshees can cloak and deal a ton of damage to all their anti-air. I've also got my second armory for extra upgrades, but unfortunately I didn't get that third base up in time rather, in order to actually reap the benefits of that second armory. Another thing I want to draw attention to is that I now have 5 factories on 2 bases. Finally 2 mules come down, but back to the factories. I want to point out the fact that those factories are 3 tech labs and 2 reactors. In the past, you probably have noticed that I am a big fan of more tech lab factories. I think that might be a mistake. I think it's time to get more reactor factories, and I remember someone actually commented on that. It was a game on Metalopolis that I played against Kernameric, a Protoss practice partner of mine. Sorry for butchering your name. And yeah, he suggested that I do that, so I think that's actually a pretty decent idea, to be honest. As you can see, minerals do stack up with mech, and you need a way to spend them, and command centers and Hellions are probably the best way. So you want to continually make Banshees, probably want them rallied to the same place as your factories. Another great thing you can do, oh man, I really don't want to forget to point this out. If your Banshee harassment is completely just stopped in its tracks, like he actually goes to the lengths of putting photon cannons up, then what you should actually do is scout around the map for these proxy pylons. That's one of the best things you can do. With one Banshee, you can take out all his proxy pylons, and I can't stress enough how powerful that is in the late game in this matchup. You do not want Warpins of Zealots just wrecking your mineral lines while you're up at him sieged up. Not what you want at all. So please remember that. Only if your harassment is denied, of course. Or even if it's not denied and you just happen to find one, just kill that thing. You just want to get rid of that. It's something you don't really have the luxury of for other matchups. Now, here's a great little engagement for me. I scanned to try and take out any potential observers. The point defense drone actually just wrecks those stalkers, and the Banshees target fire the Immortals. So, almost what I would call flawless engagement, largely because of that harassment in the early game. Just really whittled down his army so it just wasn't an even fight to begin with. Now, I send my Cloak Banshees over there to deal with the army that was trying to kill my 4th base, and I cloak those suckers so that he can... I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm talking like this, I'm just in a good mood. I cloak those bad boys in order to kill those units, and another thing you'll notice is he had a bunch of stalkers. There they go, saved up in his main, and that really didn't do him any favors in that engagement. One of the greatest things about having Banshees in your mix, while this last engagement goes overwhelmingly in my favor, is that it really does contain him, or forces his army to be way smaller than it would have otherwise because he has to leave anti-air behind. But anyway, it's a win by me. Like I said, I post wins and losses. It's just lately the trend has been wins, except for 6 cheese losses in a row. Really wasn't feeling the best that day. Anyway, I've moved up to rank 27. Still working my way up here. Should get in Master League, hopefully this season, but you never know when it's university. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Merci beaucoup pour avoir regardé cette vidéo. J'espère que vous retournerez à mon prochaine vidéo. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you again. Merci beaucoup. And always got to point out the fact that I do appreciate you. I do appreciate you getting your daily dose of ownage. Peace out.